this is remarkable because I started out more often saying that it was a Trojan horse presidency. There's a lot of illusions, a lot of things you can say about this Biden regime. So it's a Trojan horse for the left. I think that has been proven true, meaning that you put this guy, let's be honest, this guy who's basically 80 years old, he's been around forever, he's from Delaware, he's kind of whatever, but he's very well known because he's been in the game for so long. You say he's not going to be pushing radical policies. Actually, turns out he is, or pushes whatever the radical advisors around him want for the left, and the Democrat Party has radicalized dramatically as a party. Clay's been saying for a while as well that it's the Weekend at Bernie's presidency, and I will tell you all, have you seen it, Clay? Have you seen the movie? It's
not in a recent time, but yeah, I saw Weekend at Bernie's 1 and Weekend at Bernie's 2.
First of all, the fact that there are two of them is remarkable.
That was so successful they made a sequel.
But for the purposes of our discussion, at least then if we get to a second Biden administration, the analogies will be easy to continue in Weekend at Bernie's too. But yes, it's a very silly story about guys who go out to their boss's house in Long Island, and the boss actually dies of a heart attack, and they carry the body around. I mean, it's an absolutely absurd movie that I don't think it holds up very well. I'm just gonna put that out there. But it's a crazy concept, and so it sort of continues on. The Biden presidency increasingly involves people just averting their eyes from what they can obviously see about real cognitive decline. Clay mentioned this early in the week. I wanted to bring it up here. Biden scraps, this is from the New York Post, Biden scraps Oval Office teleprompter, Oval Office events for sets due to lack of teleprompter. So Biden has to have, because he can't actually, speak off the cuff. He can't. Remember, Trump would do these stop and spray things, they call it, with the press corps, walking here and there. He would take them on. They'd come at him. He'd have some one-liner. He was tweeting up a storm. There were all these things you could say about Trump. If you want to criticize him for this or that, fine. I I voted for him twice. I'm a huge supporter. But the point is, Clay's a Trump supporter. But you can't say the guy didn't have sound mind, meaning that he wasn't sharp enough to handle all the things going on and everything. I mean, he was like a one-man political force of nature. Joe Biden, without the prompter, starts kind of muttering and sounding like a guy who's been through his paces in his 80. His prompter is so big. I mean, it looks like they're carrying around, there's actually photos of it you can see now online. It looks like they're carrying around like a 70-inch flat screen, which I'm going to say, even as a guy, I think there are limits to how big your flat screen should be. People might yell at me. I think once you get over 65 inches, you're starting to turn your entire apartment, your entire house into a movie set or something, or a TV
I think it depends on the size. You got a 600 square foot New York City.
Maybe I'm just bitter because it actually takes up my entire wall. So there's that. But
for people who live in a bit bigger places, they may be open to it. But yeah, Buck, if you look at Joe Biden's teleprompter, first of all, he can still barely read it, but the words are as large as people, it feels like.
Yes.
Right? I mean, it is. They can't do events in the Oval Office because Biden can't go off script, and they have to write out for him everything on the teleprompter. And remember in his State of the Union address when he ended it with that crazy, "Go get him," and everybody's like, what are they even saying there? I think that he was reading the instructions to other people to go get Biden.
Yes.
If you put it in the prompter, he is the Ron Burgundy president. Basically, Biden will try to read it. Now, sometimes he can't even read it. You heard him trying to say oligarch, where he froze and he couldn't manage to read through it. And they try to claim that he's got a stutter now, Buck. But you go back and look at clips of Joe Biden 20 years ago, that stutter was not very prevalent in terms of the way that he spoke. There's no comparison between Joe Biden 20 years ago and Joe Biden today.
By the way, speaking as a member honestly, by the way, I've told the story before, somebody who had to overcome a childhood speech impediment. So from the speech impediment community, we really don't need to hear about how Joe Biden's cognitive decline, which is obvious, is actually a speech. It's not. That's not true. They're just trying to come up with some explanation where, you can't say anything, because obviously you never want to undermine someone's speech impediment. It's a very tough thing to deal with. But he's 80 and he's the president. And Clay, that then brings me to, this memoir that's coming out from the former Pentagon chief, former Secretary of Defense, Esper, where they talk about how President Trump was considering or talked about possible missile strikes against drug labs, essentially the places where they're making fentanyl in Mexico, against the narco traffickers, the cartels. The cartels are the wealthiest criminal organization in the world. Well, maybe the Democrat Party, but then the cartels, the wealthiest criminal organization in the world. And okay, I can understand why I certainly understand why cross-border covert action involving missiles into Mexico would be an issue. But the fact that Trump wanted to take action against the cartels that are responsible overwhelmingly for over 100,000 people dying. I spoke to a friend of mine last night, and we had a friend in common. The guy was a veteran. The guy was he was a door kicker and did the real stuff. I mean, I won't get into it all now, but he went to the VA, got a little bit of the early stage of fentanyl, or got painkillers, and then got hooked on fentanyl. He was gone in a matter of months. That stuff is so addictive. It is so poisonous. And the fact that the cartels are pumping that into America is killing tens of thousands of our fellow Americans every year. It is all over the place. It's all over the streets. It's easy to find. Trump wanting to take some kind of direct action. Okay, missile strikes, maybe not the way, but direct action, cross-border direct action against the drug cartels. I think that's actually a good idea. We should just figure out how to coordinate with Mexico. But just, Clay, think of that and then compare it to the Biden administration with the guy who has the teleprompter that's too big, is bragging about sharing intelligence with the Ukrainians to shoot a Russian warship with missiles to sink it. And they act like, yeah, that's not reckless at all. We should be walking around, talking. I mean, it's crazy when you think about it. What's happening in Mexico affects us a hell of a lot more than what's going on right now in Ukraine in terms of our security. That's the truth.
Well, it also leaves what Russia could do to us is far more dangerous than what Mexico could do for us, right? For whatever we do. So the consequences of taking out drug cartels in Mexico, even if it angers Mexico, are far less significant than the story of us helping to sink a Russian ship. And also, Buck, front page news, that we were providing intelligence that has led to the death of 12 Russian generals, I believe.
Yes.
That we were involved in that. So my question would be, when I read those articles, I mean, I always try to think about it from not only the perspective of Russians, but how would Americans react if we found out that Russia was providing intelligence that had led to the death of 12 high-ranking American military officials? We'd consider it an act of war, probably.
I had a friend from the a friend formerly of the special operations community just asked me recently, as if I'm going to be able to come up with an answer on the spot. I mean, I appreciate the idea that my previous background would lend to some kind of sanity on this, but it was a tough one. He said, "What happens? What happens if Russia actually did, let's say, detonate what they call a tactical nuke, a low-yield nuclear weapon in Ukraine to try to bring the conflict to an end in their favor? What do you think the U.S. does?" I don't have an easy answer. We're not even thinking about this stuff. We're not even having a conversation. Yeah. We're talking about helping them to kill generals. We're talking about helping them to sink warships. At some point, as Russia, if this works, it gets more and more dangerous the more we push, right? Russia cornered, everyone knows this, a wounded animal that's cornered is the most dangerous. A Putin that is cornered and actually losing here and feels like there's destabilization of his regime can become more of an issue for us. Look, I'm so sick of people saying, oh, you're being a Russia stooge or whatever to anybody who brings this stuff up. No, these are the real conversations that need to be happening here based on the involvement that we already have over there. And it shouldn't just be a bunch of idiots who know nothing about geopolitics or the military, by the way, with 6 Ukraine flags in their Twitter bios telling everybody what should be going on. But notice, discussion of what to do against Mexican narco traffickers under Trump, crazy, it's in a memoir, how dare he, bragging about helping the Ukrainians sink Russian vessels. By the way, what's with the and kill Russian generals? That should never be talked about from the administration. Quite honestly, the press shouldn't be talking about it either. It's not helpful.
That's what I thought when I read the article. I'm surprised it didn't turn into a bigger issue Because, again, just take it outside of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. If we found out that 12 of our high-ranking military officials had been killed because of intelligence that was provided by a country that was claiming that they were not involved in conflict with us, I think we would almost immediately say, hey, it sounds like that country's involved in conflict with us. By the way, rightfully. So the fact that we leaked this and allowed this to be out publicly is, to me, an absolute malpractice of foreign policy.
I mean, I'll tell you this, and you think through. We call this war gaming, right? For obvious reasons. Okay, let's say that this continues on. Let's say that we give the bigger artillery, better weaponry, more training to the Ukrainians. At some point, the Russians just say, this has gone too far, and we have a 3-star general who goes to Poland, who goes in theater. And, the Russians, let's say they pull something off. They pull off a strike. They shoot his plane out of the sky. That doesn't matter, right? But they take out a senior U.S. Military official. What is the U.S. response actually going to be? Think about the Biden administration. They're pushed with, what are we going to do if Russia uses chemical weapons? They go, what would the U.S. response be? Because at some point, the Russians will say, hey, guys, we're just defending. They're the aggressors. They're the bad guys. Yeah, that's all true in Ukraine. But at some point, they're going to do what they do to defend their interests, even if it means that they're coming after us. And have we even prepared for that? Have we even thought about this? I think as a country, we're just kind of drifting toward more and more involvement in a war with a country that has thousands of nuclear weapons, everybody. Thousands and thousands of nukes.
Not only that, Buck, I doubt that we have game planned it out very well. Who's even making the decision? Joe Biden, do you trust him to be making rational and reasonable and intelligent decisions having to do with foreign policy affairs? I mean, we talked about this on the show a lot, Buck, but Joe Biden couldn't do a job on this radio show. He couldn't work at Outkick, the website, the media company that I run. Buck, he couldn't do a single job there. And yet we're going to trust him to respond to the most highly tension-laden geopolitical situation in many of our lives.
This is exactly the point. The commander-in-chief, who looks like he doesn't know where he is sometimes, and who has a teleprompter the size of a movie screen that's set up to be like a children's book with one word at a time, that's who we're going to trust to make an on-the-spot decision if things escalate with Russia dramatically, which they could. We don't really think about this very much over here, but that could happen quickly. It happens easily. And all it takes is one miscalculation. All it takes is one moment that Putin decides that he's going to try to send a message to turn the tide in their favor. And we're going to have and then think of the other people around him. We're going to have Joe Biden and who else? We're going to have the announce their pronouns, diversity and inclusion obsessed, Green New Deal, lunatic commies in the White House making the calls. That's terrifying.
You asked a great question. Last week, I think we had the NFL draft going on. Who would you draft to actually be the most competent member of the Biden administration? And we can't even come up with a name. Like somebody, if we had to pick somebody and say, okay, well, at least this guy or this girl is going to make every decision, I would have thought Merrick Garland would have been my answer before they actually brought him in. And then he's got domestic terrorist investigations for kids, for parents who are showing up to talk about their kids at the school board. Yeah. Like, this guy's proven himself to be a non-entity. I don't even know what the answer is. Who is the least imbecilic member of the Biden administration that you would most want to be making these choices? I can't even give you a name.
Yeah, but if Merrick Garland, Clay, because of your showing up at that school board and talking about masks, if he's got you on some list and sends you to Gitmo, don't worry. This audience, man, we'd put together an A-team. We'd do a halo drop. We'd have you out of there, no problem.
I
just put out the
Biden
bat
administration
signal, you'd be fine. This audience.
I bet we have some files on us for a lot of different things at this point based on the way they're grabbing information inside of the Biden administration.